welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. It's the opening of the fall sessions of the International Monetary Fund. We're recording the broadcast on Friday, October 8th, and the finance ministers, central bank chiefs, the finance oligarchy of the world gathering in Washington at the fall session of the IMF and its sinister twin institution, the World Bank, the masters of human destiny, the chiefs of the finance departments that consider the politicians simply grinning frontmen for the real power behind the throne. And they meet now in conditions of crisis. We are in a world economic depression, and the specter now is currency war, a currency war, the bellum omnium contra omnes, the war of all against all in the currency field, a series of competitive devaluations, maneuvers designed to beggar my neighbor, how to export the depression to the next guy, how to pass the buck. The buck, of course, means depression, collapse, disintegration, impoverishment, and so forth. How to shift the burdens of the world economic depression onto the next guy. And, of course, the originators of the game are the Anglo-Americans ensconced in Wall Street and the City of London. They are the ones who started all this, and they have sown the wind. They are now harvesting the whirlwind. And the immediate perspective is for the final disintegration of what remains of the post-Bretton Woods system, the post-August 15th, 1971 junkyard, field of ruins, rubble field that we've been living in, nevertheless did have a certain lunatic logic in the center of it. The entire experiment of globalization is now under attack. We're 20 years into the lunatic policies of globalization, hot money, deregulation, privatization, free trade, no tariffs, no limits, no nothing, just the world casino economy of derivatives, hot money, floating rates. That entire system is now in crisis, and it could immediately be swept away by a wave of protectionism, as they would call it, mercantilism, hopefully dirigism, some populism maybe, all of that quite possible. And the question, of course, with that, like everything else, is let's see the details, how is it going to be done? But in principle, we can say, as we've been saying on this broadcast, globalization is a catastrophe. Free trade is the giant sucking sound destroying the U.S. economy and creating a world where we've got 3 billion plus, probably more like 3.5 billion people living on less than $2 a day. And after 20 years of globalization, that is the final verdict. It's a failure. Junk it, get rid of it, move away. And the only way to move away is under these crisis conditions. People are going to have to defend themselves. We are now entering the age of exchange controls and capital controls, and welcome to them. The hot money economy, so beloved of George Soros and the other hedge fund operators, the international hyenas, asset strippers, and hot money purveyors. This is going out the window, and we're going to have exchange controls and capital controls very soon. The government of Thailand is on the brink. So let's talk a little bit about now this entire situation as the International Monetary Fund meets. The immediate prelude for this is the low dollar. We've been talking on this program about the attempt of the U.S. and the British to shift the depression into the euro. And that was the big project from November or December 2009 through May and June of this year. And now the summer is over. The autumn is coming on the banks of the Potomac here, The leaves are changing. And now we're seeing those inherent forces of depression, that 1.5 quadrillion of kited toxic derivatives, is now expressing itself back home against the dollar going down, 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 and therefore tremendous pressure is being built up on other countries to protect themselves, because all of that $24 trillion of bailout and U.S. government assistance through the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the Treasury to these bankrupt derivatives bankers and zombie bankers, all of that money has fled into the third world, into the emerging markets in the form of a carry trade, and it's driving up everybody's currency, from Brazil to Thailand to India to South Africa to even Switzerland, driving up all of those. So they're freaking out because they are getting priced out of the world market. It also means if you have a lot of debt, the way the Japanese do, if your currency goes up, 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 then the burden of that debt becomes greater and greater and greater. And a mild inflation would take away the debt. But a higher currency price means that the debt is magnified. So those are the pressures, and the only way you can really protect yourself against that, you can do some interventions, as some countries have been doing, but the only real way to protect yourself against that is to stop those hot money flows from coming in, to block them, to tax them. Better, do both. Block most of them and tax whatever gets through. So that's the pressure. And, of course, the globalized model demands absolute chaos, absolute floating rates, maximizing risk, of course, ironically, but absolute floating rates and the absolute dominion of hot money. Remember, the motto of the globalizers and the Washington Consensus is that speculative, parasitical hot money has got to be able to go anywhere it wants, anytime it wants, and destroy anything it wants in order to loot and asset strip the countries in question. And that is the principle that is now in crisis. So the risk of the currency war is on the lips of all of these clerks who run the international system. Dominique Strauss-Kahn, the honcho of the International Monetary Fund, Trichet at the European Central Bank, Geithner at the U.S. Treasury, Olivier Blanchard, the top economist of the IMF, Zolik, the sinister boss of the World Bank. That's what they all say. Let's go through some of these statements. And notice the focus of a lot of it is anti-Chinese. They want to blame China for the inherent unworkability and dysfunctionality of their system. And why is that? Because they want, having failed to expression to they wanted to break up the euro, they now want to make sure that the depression is exported to China, because otherwise it's going to settle in the U.S. and British sphere, where it actually started and where most of these derivatives are, of course, located, as we know. So the idea now is that the Japanese got the ball rolling. Japan started around the 15th of September with a unilateral surprise intervention into the currency markets, selling yen, buying dollars, buying other currency, but dumping their own yen to make sure that the price of the yen would go down. And it was a shock because they hadn't done any of that since about 2004. They did it unilaterally. They did it as a surprise. And this has focused the attention of the world on the idea that you can control, nations can control their own currency, which from the point of view of globalization, why, that's heresy. That violates the free market. Well, the free market is taking it on the chin. It never existed. It was controlled by cartels, and now it's going out the window. And we'll be back in a minute